my primary aim this afternoon over the next hour and a half is to make sure that we are ready to hybrid stream this evening's event. So in that sense, this is only partly a training event. This is very much, I'm going to do what needs to be done, and I'm going to do my best to talk about what it is I'm doing while I'm doing it. When we do and some of this will reiterate when we do the formal training, and it will also give me an idea as to whether we've got the timing of the formal training right. I think we probably have, in terms of the amount of duration and the sort of things we want to cover and so on. But the main technologies we're going to be using, of course, are some video, some audio, and some laptops, Windows laptop stuff. Essentially, we have 4 things that we need to think about. For the people in the room, one step back. What do we mean by hybrid in this context? Hybrid in this context, we're talking about events where we've got people in a room and people individually remote. So we are very used to having situations where everything is remote, and if it's interactive, we typically call it Zoom, and everybody is at home looking at their own laptop. And if the people at the far end are not interactive, we call it television. That's what it is. It's a one-way stream. And it may be television, or it may be a webcast or a webinar, but those are typically one way. The only difference being one is received on a television with an aerial on the roof, and the other is received over the internet on a laptop, but otherwise they are the same. Then, as I say, when they become interactive, one-on-one, then that's what we're used to, and Zoom is the most amazingly successful platform. There were other platforms around, particularly in the commercial area before that, but Zoom suddenly caught everybody's imagination 2 years ago, and I wish I'd bought the shares. And then, but I don't call those hybrid, because they are all point to point, they're one-to-one. The point it becomes hybrid is where we have a group of people in the room and we have other people out in the field, if you like. It's a sort of a hub and spoke arrangement. And again, we can do that two ways. We can do that with everybody in the room really participating and the people at home sort of watching in from a distance. And for the shuls that were streaming, this is the liberal and reform shuls, not the orthodox shuls. For the shuls that were streaming their services before lockdown, that's what they were doing. You could watch in, but you couldn't participate. But it starts becoming interesting when it really becomes inclusive, and when everybody can participate equally. Where people in the room, or people at home on Zoom, the roomers and the Zoomers, have an equal part in what's going on. And that's what I'm focusing on hybrid, or blended, or multi-access. There are lots of names for this. And one I came across this week, which I think is really quite interesting, which is phygital. A cross between physical and digital. And phygital, I think, is really just a rather interesting name.
Yeah.
And who knows which of these will catch on. But we'll continue to call them hybrid for the time being. Okay, so we are dealing with a hybrid event today, and therefore we have to achieve 4 things. We have to make sure that people in the room can see people who are remote, and in this case that includes the guest speaker. We have to make sure that people in the room can hear the people who are remote, which may be the guest speaker, or which is critically important, otherwise we've got a bit of a disaster on our hands, or people doing a Q&A. Then we have to make sure that the people who are away from here can see what's happening here. The 4th thing we have to deliver is we have to be able to let the people there hear what's going on here. So in other words, at its simplest, we've got video and audio in, and we've got video and audio out. So we've got 4 things we need to deliver. All of that is brought together through typically a laptop, and it'll be running Zoom. Now, when we run Zoom, when we're sitting in front of it, we take all of that entirely for granted. But if you think about if you're just sitting at home running Zoom, that's what's happening. If you're sitting at home, this is what you naturally expect. You're sitting in front of a screen, you can see and hear what's going on, and people remotely can see or hear you, unless we've got the classic you're on mute. So there's nothing new about this. The difference is the technology we use to deliver it. And so that's really what we're going to focus on. And they each have different degrees of complexity, and they have some different tech that we will use to get us going and moving and so on. Okay? But I'm going to work it through in that sequence. I'm going to start by making sure that the people in the room can see and hear. And then we're going to work on how do the people who are out there see and hear us. And the reason I'm going to do it in that sequence is firstly because that is the critical part. Essentially we have four things we need to deliver. We need to be able to get video and audio out from here to the world, and we need to be able to get audio and video from the world back into this room.
Is it this room that we're in?
This is this room, yes. And we're going to work together to establish that, and we're going to work together on making sure that people in this room can see and hear the outside world first, and then we'll worry about making sure that people in the room can see, that people remotely can see and hear what's happening here. Because that's actually less important. If something didn't work, then worst case is, okay, people remotely couldn't see the Q&A that was happening from here. And secondly, because it's actually the more difficult part. So we're going to focus on the easy, important stuff first, and then I'm expecting us to get through all of it. Okay, so let's start. One of the big challenges with this sort of setup is, particularly if we are in a space that we haven't used before, is we don't quite know what kit there will be and how the room will work and how it's going to be set up. So the project, Jewish Scotland Connected, has now purchased 2 complete kit bags of laptop and camera and other bits and pieces, all of which I have brought up with me. And so we are going to explore all that together and put it all together and make it work. We can actually set up both if we choose to, or we'll at least focus on setting up one of them and making sure it works for our event, and then we'll develop up from there. Okay, so that's the name of the event. Broadly, there are 2 ways of people out in the world seeing what's going on here. Either a large screen telly, like what you now have next door, or a projector, which is what they have here. So we have rented this projector. I have never met it before, so that's what we're going to be working with. So immediately we need to start thinking about the room layout, because wherever the projector and telly are going to be, it needs to be sensible. In general, for this sort of event, it is easier, for reasons that you'll see later, for us to have the room arranged this way round, that's to say a wide, shallow room, rather than a long, narrow room.
And that's better for teaching as well as for...
It's better for teaching, it's better for engagement, it's much better for filming, and in this room it's also better for light. Because the last thing you want to do is have your speaker panel or your television up against the window. So, as it happens, this room works perfectly in that way. So that's what we're going to do, and that's where they've left us the projector. So let's see what we've got.
Oh, there's also a...
Oh no, it's a sound bar. Okay.
There's a wall, is there not?
There is. But often a box that looks like this sitting here might have been a pulley-uppy screen, but it isn't. It's a sound bar. Okay, that's fine. That's useful. So they obviously use their wall as the screen. So if we turn on the projector, so one thing I think we can probably assume is that that projector is going to be too close. It may not be. There are what called some very short throw projectors. They're used a lot in schools, and literally they can hang above the wall about 2 foot from the wall and project a good image. But I very much doubt that this is one of those. My laptop doesn't have built-in HDMI connector. So I need to walk around with one. It's all right. Don't get all touchy with me, laptop. Oh, okay, good. So at least we know we have something. But clearly we're going to have to be quite a lot further away. Projectors are much happier if you turn them off rather than explicitly unplug them. They get a little bit twitchy if you just pull the plug on them, because they like to cool down a little bit. So the projector, as I said, is now just, it's got a blue flashing light on it, which suggests to me that it, when we switched it off, it then needs a cooling down period to just warm up again. So we will discover in a moment what it can do. So we'll come back to video in a minute. That starts to fill the wall. Then we will need to get it a bit higher on the wall. Then we will need to focus it. Often these projectors have one of they've got 3 legs. There's one in the middle that makes it go up and down, and 2 at the back, at least one of which is often adjustable, which allows me to just get that corner up a bit and get it reasonably straight. This claims to be a zoom, but it clearly isn't. It barely zooms at all, and so the amount of zoom it has is tiny on this projector. It almost needn't bother to have one. I suspect they've used a generic piece of equipment. Right. Okay. The other thing that projectors have is a thing called Keystone. And Keystone is designed for squaring up the image when it's all a bit wonky on the wall. So because I want this a little bit higher, I'm looking for something suitable that I can stick under the front leg. A suitable prop, or a slightly burnt out candle, will do the job, because for people in the room, that just wants to be really rather higher. So, as I said, projectors have this thing called Keystone. So you can see now that that image, because I'm pointing the projector up, it's gone wonky. There are 2 little sort of trapezoidal diagrams on this thing, and as I push them in one direction or the other,
Wow, impressive. Really good. Who knew?
it squares them up. So we have a projector that is now doing what we expect it to do. Good stuff. So I'm now going to switch to using one of our laptops. I used mine just really to get us going to understand what was happening. So, come and meet the kit. They are pretty much identical. Ignore that lot, which is mine, over and above. In the back of each of them, there is a laptop, and they are labelled with imaginative names: Skojek JSC 2, and your guess as to what the other one is called. There's its friend. And if I open up the main compartment, there is our bag of toys. I'll take that out for a moment because it shouldn't yet be in there. And the main bags of toys in there, the most important one within there is this one, which is the camera. Okay. The 2 expensive bits of kit are the laptop and the camera. The rest of it are sort of ancillary bits that we're going to need, and we will gradually augment the kit as we find what we need. We have budget for it, but I haven't spent all the budget to start with until we know exactly what we need, depending on the venue. Okay. I'll unplug my laptop. I'll just keep it to one side. script. And just because of the way round we are, we'll move those across. And we will stick the laptop next to it. I've chosen the laptops because they're big, rather than being portable. And there's a trade-off there, but what we're trying to do, this stuff is very rarely going to have to be really carried enormous distances, and having a good big laptop is actually much easier for being able to see what's going on. So that's why we've got fairly big screen laptops. Before we go any further with the laptop, let's plug it in. I have, because there's a lot of cables and kit and so on, I've labelled up the most important, the obvious ones. So there is a power pack here that says laptop on it. Let me not get confused between the two. Shut that one again, because that's, as it were, the spare one, because that's still got its laptop in it, yes. So we'll park that to one side. The kits are identical at the moment. And now you can see why we have our extension leads, because this laptop is nearly always going to be in the middle of the room, and there's never ever going to be a power point where you want it. And I would very rarely feel comfortable trying to do this sort of thing on battery power. They only ever go down 5 minutes before you want them. You've all had that experience. Okay, so it now has power. And if I plug the HDMI cable in, if I can find the HDMI socket, like that. Each of the laptops also has we'll worry about cables in a minute in terms of tidying up. The two laptops each have their own identity. They actually have their own email addresses. And they are known as Skojek JSC2 at outlook.com and Skojek JSC1 at outlook.com. And they both have the same PIN number, and there is a sheet which has the critical sign-in details, which I will leave with each kit. HDMI is the standard connector. It's that slightly flat square thing. It's used for projectors and DVD players and televisions and so on. But HDMI cables have a limitation on length of realistically about 3 meters, 5 if you're very lucky. Depending on the layout of the room, if it's a projector, it may not be too bad as it is here because we can get fairly close. But if this was a screen, if this was a large screen television, and depending on the size of the hall and so on, I'd have to be able to get from the laptop to the telly, and that cable would be pushing its luck. So we have in here a kit called an HDMI Extender. And this will allow us to go anything up to about 10, 12, 15 metres. In other words, plenty of room for any natural sized room. We'll look at it later. Effectively, what it is, well, I will show you quickly now. We're not going to need to use it today, which is great. What it is two boxes called HDMI Extender. One is marked input. Oh, okay. That one is marked HDMI out. That one is marked HDMI in. And so what we end up with is the one end needs a power supply. And then you get a short HDMI cable in at one end, a short HDMI cable out at the other end, and a network cable, the so-called Cat6 network cable, between the two. So that's what we have in this kit. Two short HDMI cables and a long network cable. So it would go television, HDMI cable, extender, Cat5 or Cat6 cable, extender, HDMI cable, laptop.
So for television, you could also exchange that.
Yes, exactly.
That's the same thing.
Exactly. Because otherwise you can't. Otherwise you're constrained by where the laptop goes, depending on the length of the cable, and typically the cable's just not long enough, depending on where you want to be. Typically, in this sort of scenario, having the laptop close to the camera position is usually the most comfortable, because that's one less cable we have to extend. Good one. Okay, so we've done one of our 4 bits. We now have a video working on the wall and it's connected to our laptop. So the next thing we need to do is to be able to hear what's going on in the outside world. So in other words, we need to be able to plug whatever the sound system is into the laptop. This again can vary depending on the venue. Next door, they have bought a large screen television with a sound bar built into it, which means that the sound...
Separate sound bar.
Yes, but I'm assuming the sound bar is connected to the television, or it will be.
Will be.
That's not, it isn't yet, because it's in boxes at the moment.
We just ordered whatever you said.
Yes, absolutely. But once it is, then the sound which gets to the television will automatically get into the soundbar. And the good thing about HDMI is HDMI carries both picture and sound. The good thing is that HDMI carries both picture and sound, which means that if we had sound connected to this projector, for example, the fact that it's connected by HDMI would mean we solved our sound problem. In the world of a big television, that's what normally happens. In the world of a projector isn't, we need separate sound. So, we have a sound bar. Good news, we have a sound bar. Bad news, we have a 2-meter problem. Because the cable connected to the sound bar is that long, and the sound source is over there. And I assume that is how long it is. Yes, okay. So, anticipating that, in my own box of tricks, I have brought a sound cable extension lead, which I haven't yet bought for the kit here, but looks as though we'll need one. And this again just sort of reinforces the point of you never quite know what you're going to find in a venue you haven't worked in. And there's no good way around that, that just is how it is. The good thing about audio is that audio doesn't care about cable lengths, whereas video does on HDMI, audio doesn't.
Why does it matter for video?
Technically, the reason why it doesn't work is because there's an enormous amount of signal going down the line. And the higher the resolution, whether it's HD or even 4K, and there's just too much loss in the cables. And you get interference between them. And so, and because the technology we're using was designed for the consumer market as opposed to the professional market, when they designed these interfaces, they said, well, how far is your Xbox, is your Xbox going to be from your telly? It's going to be in the same room. 5 meters will be good enough. Whereas kit which is used in the professional space uses completely different technologies to be able to deal with the problem. Like our HDMI extender. Because our HDMI extender then switches it from being an HDMI cable to a network cable, and that then gives us much greater length. Here we have an extension cable for sound, which I'm going to plug into the sound the headphone socket of the laptop. If I can find it, it's there. Right, does it work? Well, we don't know yet. So, before I start worrying about Zoom, I'm just going to run a bit of YouTube, because that will tell us whether we've got video and audio working. But to be able to do that, I need to be on Wi-Fi. So now we have to work out how we turn on the power on the sound bar. Where are we? Power on. Any lights anywhere on the
Even lies.
Oh! Okay. So, we have two parts working. Well, 2.5 parts. We have a laptop, we have video, we have the outside world. We have audio. Good. And we have a laptop that is being entirely uncooperative that I shall worry about later.
Supposing somebody wanted to do it from their own laptop, would you expect that to work with this kit as well?
Yes.
It would have to be Windows 10 or it would not have to be? Could be anything.
Could be anything. Doing what we're doing today, we're not using any special software.
Yeah.
We will talk later about some extra software we might use to improve particularly the video, in which case somebody else's laptop would work, but they'd have to install some extra software, but it's free software. What I wouldn't suggest is trying to run the Zoom meeting and this lot all on the same laptop. There's too much going on.
Oh, so this would...
This laptop will sign into Zoom, but this is the whole. But my strong recommendation is that whoever is hosting the Zoom meeting is running Zoom separately, and that this is just a participant. It'll become a co-host actually. So we've got 2.5 out. We've got the laptop, we've got the video and the audio working. Fine. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring video in from the room, so we get to play with some more toys. Here we have a camera. Not much to look at. It's a very simple camera. It's a bit bigger than mine. Perhaps because mine's 10 years old, or thereabouts. It's a camcorder. So there are multiple different types of camera. There are webcams built into laptops, which you're all familiar with. There are webcams that you just clip on top of a laptop, which you're probably all familiar with. There are digital SLRs, so things that look like proper cameras, all of which are now sold as being great for video, and they are. And there are camcorders which are purpose-made for video. And the big advantage of a camcorder over a DSLR is that their inbuilt microphones are much better, and their their motorized zoom is much better. So what that means is that you can, well, if I wanted to zoom on an SLR, I'd actually have to twiddle the knob on the front of the barrel most of the time, on most, which makes it more difficult to hold it steady, and while you've got a very good degree of fine control, it's certainly quite difficult to do is zoom while you're in the middle of a shot. The big advantage of a camcorder is it's got a button on the top called wide and telephoto, and if I just hold the wide button to the left and the right, you will see that the harder, if I push it hard, it goes whoosh straight in, and if I pull it back gently, it comes out much more slowly. And so I can actually be much more of a camera person, a cameraman, by controlling what's going on very easily. For the techies amongst you, these are 4K camcorders, so high resolution camcorders. Worth saying if you're picking it up, and they automatically switch off as soon as you just close their little lid. That's all you have to do with them.
What battery does it run on?
It runs on its own battery, which is rechargeable, and it'll give you about 2 hours on battery run. And you can run it powered. You can run it permanently powered, as we will. I would never recommend running either cameras or laptops on their batteries, but you can. If you listen carefully, you'll hear it rattles. Okay. Can't quite hear it, but if you were to try it, you would hear it rattling. That is normal and it's right. And it is not broken. In fact, it's rather sweet. There's a note inside the box which says, "Don't worry, it'll rattle." It has automatic stabilisation in it, because if you are being a video person taking your shots on holiday or making your feature film or whatever, that's the normal way of holding it. It's got a little strap on the side, which means you've got a go button there, and the zoom is under your finger there, and everything is in the right place and it's easy to use. But it has automatic stabilisation in it, so if you're running for a bus, it doesn't give you seasickness. We won't need to worry too much about that because we're going to be on a tripod. I mentioned a tripod. We get to open another toy.
The small one is just tiny, but short.
Yeah.
Which we use for my granddaughter's back.
Yeah.
The laptop for free, but
Yeah. Yeah, if it's stationary, it doesn't matter. But if it's going to be moving around, then it will make a difference. Right. As you said, this is an unboxing video. As I rather expected, there is a separate handle. Once they're built, they all look the same. That's fine. And there are two, for the benefit of the camera as well, there are two knobs on it to control how smoothly it runs. There's one on the side there which tightens up how much it swivels, and there's one on the side there which controls how much it rocks. There is also a little bubble, a little spirit level bubble, but normally if you've got the legs at the same length, then it will all be the same. And somehow this instinctively doesn't feel quite level. I'm just wondering whether I've got all the legs out exactly the same distance. Okay, no, and there is an adjuster in the middle there. Okay. There's an adjuster in the middle there, so if the thing is on a slightly wonky floor, that's how it gets levelled. That's the test. The camera will attach to a plate. And there's the plate, and there's a little red button there that releases the plate that allows it to slide out. There are two sizes of screw on there. Our camera has the smaller one, so I'm going to take out the bigger one altogether because we're not going to need it. And I will pop it back in, or close to the bag. The camera, you can see, has a screw thread at the bottom and a little locating hole, as does the plate. So one goes into the other. It screws up. It can either be operated by a coin, or it looks as though there is a little, yes, there's a little thumb handle thing that just allows us to tighten. It doesn't need to be particularly tight. These tripods are capable of taking much heavier cameras than these. It'll then slide on, and again there is a little knob on the side that just tightens up to hold the camera firmly in place. Right, so we now have a camera that now runs nice and smoothly. There's another bag called camera cables. And that's got two things in it. Well, sorry, three things in it. it's got the camera power supply, with another little black cable twiddly on the back of it. And the power connector for the camera is in the middle of the back there. It's marked power connector. There's a little flappy thing. The power connector only goes in one way round. 50-50 chance I've got it the right way round. Whee! And it's long enough to give me some power. And a connecting cable is supplied with the camera, which is not going to be quite long enough. So what we also have, I said HDMI is okay up to about 3 meters, so we can extend this. So there's a shorter HDMI extension cable we can just plug together. So that then gives us the camera has a slightly smaller connector on the end of it. It's called a mini HDMI. And its connection is on the side here. On laptops, the HDMI, laptops have an HDMI socket, but it's only an output socket, it's not an input socket. So there is a converter which then completes this daisy chain, which converts HDMI into a USB, which is therefore something that the laptop can recognise. We could tape these three together, and indeed it may be sensible to do so, but at least I had them packed together, and we'll put them back into the pack, because what we end up with is the short USB cable, the USB extension cable, and the dongle on the end that converts. And that will plug into a USB socket.
Is that called an HDMI converter to you, or just an HDMI to USB?
Yeah.
So if you wanted to have the camera further away from that machine, you would need your extender.
Exactly, you'd need to use an extender. You can't really go much longer than this bit of cable. But often this sort of layout will work in the sense of having the camera fairly close to the laptop, depending on the layout of the room. So hopefully we've now got a camera connected to our laptop. Of course we aren't seeing anything yet because we've got nothing going on that tells us whether we have a picture. The easiest way of seeing whether it works is to actually start Zoom. There are other ways of doing it, but the easiest way of doing it is to start Zoom. You can't join a meeting unless you... so to be able to start Zoom, I'd need to actually have a meeting I can connect to. What I have done, therefore, is I've set up a free Zoom account purely for this sort of exercise, for testing. There will be in the pack a piece of paper with these relevant passwords and so on in them. Thank you. I'm not expecting us to have to use this account for anything other than this sort of testing and setup. I mean, it's a normal Zoom account, it's a free Zoom account, so it'll have the usual limitations of a free account. But the important thing is it means that we can now do that.
And it means nobody else is going to be using it, we don't have to check in with anyone else.
Exactly. Okay, so what we're seeing, of course, is it has signed itself into the laptop's camera. What I'm hoping is that it will also now see a thing called the USB video.
Ooh.
Of course, because we've got USB coming through, and now we have got our USB video.
Hey.
So we now have our camera in the room. With way too much zoom, but you get the idea of what it's capable of.
And it will mainly be pointed on.
And it will mainly be pointed on David when he's sitting there,
On top of those rolled up carpets.
on top of those rolled up carpet, when he's acting as our speaker.
And if you have questions and answers, which you would have a choice, you could either, if there was a question in the room, you do it from there. If there's a question on Zoom, then presumably the
Zoom will just switch itself over and we will see and hear it on the big screen.
Say that again.
Let me join that room so I can show it.
Fine. So, if Fiona was asking a question, Zoom would pick up on her audio. It will flick to showing her as it would normally if you were at home, and in the room we will see and hear her. This, of course, is what will happen with.
Then the person running the Zoom would spotlight.
With spotlight.
Yes, I mean, I find you mostly don't need
Do you
to.
want to make me co-host and I'll throw that?
Yeah,
Or even if it's on speaker review and somebody pipes up.
exactly,
Yeah, but it depends. 'Cause
exactly.
The chairman might want to.
Yeah, but mostly I find. Oh, it's not set up to. This account is not set up to co.
Make me host then.
Yeah.
And then I'll give it back to you.
Could be co-host.
Well, I mean, no, I can. I can spotlight.
Yeah, you can spot that.
Well, yes, I mean.
You can't make co-hosts on free accounts.
Can you not?
No.
Oh, okay. Fine. Well, we'll discover it later. My experience is that Zoom's switching of who gets in speaker view, that who gets control, who is seen, follows the audio remarkably well. So if David says, John, I see in Dumfries you want to ask a question, John, go ahead and ask your question. The moment John starts talking, if this is just on speaker view, it will flick over. We can spotlight as well, we can multi-spotlight, we can multi-pin, we do all those clever zoomy things and have two people side by side. But this is now just behaving as it would any other Zoom meeting. It's doing exactly the
Does it
same.
do the same sort of thing when it's taking input from this?
Yes. Yes.
So David would have to stop talking so as to come off it.
Yes. Yes. But that's the normal behaviour. I mean, that's the normal Zoom behaviour as you pass the conversation. Zoom in any normal meeting is pretty good at just following the conversation.
If there's
It's the participants who are not good, those that have unmuted themselves.
Indeed.
Start.
One moment, because I haven't switched you through to the soundbar. Right, so I don't know if you heard that. There was a little bit of speakery coming from my laptop. That's because I hadn't changed the speaker to be... that's interesting. It's probably that one. Try talking again to us, Fiona.
Okay, is the sound coming out of the soundbar?
It is now, absolutely it is. So now if we demonstrate what's going on, if you turn your video on as well.
It is on. My video is on.
Yeah, you're on.
Oh yeah, that's better, fine, okay. So I will now just put you up on full screen speaker view. Right,
Hello
okay.
everybody, I am now from London making a talk about how terrible it is about the people in China who are being used just like the Jews were in the Holocaust. Da-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da.
Very good. We've actually lost your video because you've got very low network bandwidth. But so be it, not much I can do about that. But the point is, hopefully you can see and hear me, and I can see and hear you.
I'm standing in the toilet. If I go outside, it will be better.
That's all right. Well, your sound is fine, and we get the idea of what's going on. But what I'm now going to do is...
Yeah, it will be better. Right. I'm now on my 4G, which should be a lot better, yeah?
Yes, it is. No, we still haven't got your video. But
Okay. And I've got your video. But anyway, you can get the idea, and I'll come upstairs now because it's raining.
right.
There she comes.
Fine.
You've got her now.
Good. Yeah, okay, now we can see you walking up the stairs. Okay, now what I've also done, because I want to just try the sound on it, I'm pointing the camera at David, who's about as far away as we can get. So if we can get you just to sort of chat for a bit, because I want to be able to hear this on the recording and see what it sounds like. Because I haven't talked about audio from here yet, but we're actually using the built-in microphone in the camera, which is by far the easiest solution, because then we don't have to think too much.
What's the range?
It's pretty good, and that's why I want to try it. I just want to make sure that we are using that microphone. Right, we weren't. We were using the microphone in the laptop. So if I now switch to using that microphone, we're now using the camera's microphone.
So I'm about 12 feet from the camera, I think. So you just do a sound check from here. Yeah. Is that picking me up okay?
Well, we'll find out in a moment when we play it back on the recording. So your chance to, to do your party piece for another 10 seconds. And
I've
I'll
got
go.
at least, well, I'm going to move left and see how it's picking up on the left. And then I'll move to the right. Oh, I meant you to keep the camera where it was so you can see if it's picking up.
Yeah, there'll be a little bit of directionality,
Yeah,
but there won't be much.
No.
Right. Okay, so hopefully that's done its thing. So I'm now going to stop all of that. A few things to observe from that. One is we still need to tweak why the video was compressing, because it should have been full screen and David had lost about 20% of his weight. Congratulations. Challenge. We all wish it were that easy. The second is that what it really points out is that you can put up with the most awful video, but if audio doesn't work, you haven't got a meeting. Indeed, when we lost Fiona's video, it didn't really affect how we were engaging. Audio is the bit that really matters when we're hosting a hybrid meeting, in both directions. Phones work and we have perfectly sensible conversations. Before we had Zoom and video and all the rest of it, we used phones, or 2 tin cans and a piece of string. Audio is where the challenge is. And the most difficult part of all of this to get right is audio in the room going out to the world. So we've looked now at all 4 components. We've looked at getting the outside video in. We talked about projectors and televisions. We've talked about getting the outside audio in, which will either be a sound system, as we've been given here, or the television. We've talked about getting the video in or from the room outwards, which is our camera plugged into our laptop going out to Zoom. And we haven't talked very much yet about audio from the room, and that's the most difficult bit. Now we get into the complexities of audio, because audio is more complicated. There are 2 ways of handling audio. Well, there are multiple ways of handling audio. There are two fundamental ways. We can either bring audio into the camera and then let the camera move everything into the laptop, or we can bring audio into the laptop independently and let Zoom bring them together. The advantage of bringing it in via the camera is the synchronization is usually better. Video and audio are very different in terms of the amount of data they send. Video sends a lot more data. It's much more complicated. It therefore tends to process more slowly in the laptop. And if you bring the audio directly into the laptop, there is a bigger risk of the audio being ahead of the video, which is a pain. If we bring the audio into the camera, then all of the signal, then the camera will hold it reasonably in sync. It'll send it down 1 wire, not 2, and the laptop won't break it.
And it also means you don't need a mixing thing.
Well,
you don't anyway.
You don't anyway in Zoom, because, right.
Yeah.
If you are only using 1 microphone, you don't need a mixer. If you have 2 wireless microphones, which feed into one box which provides 1 outlet, you don't need a mixer. But after that, as soon as you've got multiple audio devices, you need a mixer, and you get into the next level of complexity, which is a whole different story, not for today.
And also, not all the communities will want to go that far.
Exactly. The other compromise, which is what I intend doing this evening, is plugging an external microphone directly into the camera.
Is that yours, not ours yet? But we
So-
can buy one of ours sometime.
Exactly. So this is mine, and I'm going to use it now because I know what it does. So this is an external microphone, which I haven't tried with this. Have I tried? Yes, I have tried with this camera, sorry. With a microphone stand. Which will sit in front of David. So there are multiple different types of microphone for different scenarios, obviously. This is what is known as a shotgun microphone. Because it's what we do with the speakers if you don't like what I say. No. And which is pretty directional. It's reasonably discreet. We'll worry about all the electrical plumbing in a minute. And the camera has a socket for a microphone.
Perfect.
There. Right. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask David to take his place in the appointed place. And we will do another short recording on Zoom. It doesn't always work in this like this. Which the answer is often. So I can now go back into Zoom. Start a new meeting. Connecting. Come on.
Recording in progress.
Fine. And now, David, if you'd like to do your party piece again.
Welcome to Edinburgh Jewish Cultural Centre Live. We're coming to you from the Salisbury Centre in Edinburgh, and we're joined by an online audience as well. So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks to people that come as far afield as Glasgow, London,
Okay.
Lancaster.
Mornington.
Montreal.
Montreal, that's cheap. Okay.